Well, hello everybody. It's Danny from Deep South Homestead, back on porch time today. A little chilly out here today. Got my short sleeve shirt on. Got my shirt on. I know you probably can't read it there, but let me see here. Garden like your life depends on it, because it does. Wore this on the live stream the other night, and it's something that is extremely true. You know, the weather today is kind of balmy, a little cool, light breeze. The gardens are all doing fantastic. I have to say, I can't complain about the gardens. The only problem is I've noticed with me and Mr. Grow from Grow Family Network and Billy from Permapastures Farm, when they visited here this last couple of weeks, we talked about this. The soil just doesn't seem to be warming up because of these extremely cool mornings. I mean, I'm in the Deep South, and this is May. Usually the soil's done got warm by now, but it's not. You run your hand down in the soil, it's just like sticking it in a refrigerator. So the soil has not warmed up so that warm weather plants can actually take off and do really good. But now, the cool weather plants are flourishing. The fruits and all that stuff, the berries, everything is flourishing because it loves the cool morning temps and the warmer afternoons. The high tunnels are doing fantastic. I mean, I cannot complain. No insect problems. They're just rolling the food in. You know, Wanda and I are picking it every other day. We're picking something out of the high tunnels. Can't complain about that. Everything's doing really well. I have learned already this year, I've had to change my fertilizers. I was using triple 13. I've backed off from triple 13, and now I'm using 8-24-24. Because there's just too much nitrogen going into everything and it's staying cool. They don't need the heavy nitrogen when it's staying cool like this. So I've backed off on that, using a different fertilizer. I'm using a lot more fish emulsion. I'm using a lot more high phosphate, liquid high phosphate from Dr. Earth called Golden Bloom. I'm using a lot more of that on my plants, and it seems to be really boosting them with this weather anomaly that we're having, because you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and over. You got to figure out what really works. But on porch time today, I always like to throw a little bit about what we're doing, the weather, stuff like that. The fish in the pond, everybody keeps asking me about the pond. The ponds are doing great. I think we're going to have an overload of fish, to be honest with you. I think I'm fixing to start taking some fish out on a daily basis, just simply because now I'm seeing literally thousands and thousands of fish in my pond because the ecosystem has worked so well. Just want to answer that question because we've been asked that a lot. Now the catfish one in the front, the catfish, I'm having to feed them on a regular basis. They're up to about a pound, a lot of them. I want them to be a little bit bigger than that before we actually start doing a big harvest of them. But the brim in the front pond are already full-grown, big, huge brim. They are really doing good. So that's a little update on the ponds. Now, on porch time, I want to talk about nobody's doing this to get rich. Now, and I know the first thing that's going to jump in everybody's mind is YouTube. No, I'm not talking about YouTube. If you're doing YouTube to get rich, good luck, because it just doesn't happen. I mean, they're always slapping you with something, taking away your monetization. They're not paying for ads, like, you get the cheap ads or whatever. People complain because there's an ad in something. I mean, it's all kinds of stuff, but it's not YouTube. We're talking about something totally different here today. Now, what I'm going to be talking about is I'm looking at my garden here, guys. It's beautiful. I'm talking about healthy gardening. Nobody does healthy gardening to get rich. And you stop and think about it. The soil in the garden, it's alive. And we've done a video on this once before. It's alive. It's just like our bodies. Our bodies are made up of molecules and atoms and cells and all kinds of different things that goes on inside our bodies. All of our organs function. There's oxygen. It gives off carbon dioxide. I mean, there's all kinds of things our bodies do to keep them healthy. It takes particular minerals in our bodies to make them actually function and do like they're supposed to do. That's why taking synthetic drugs for ailments for the body is really not a good thing. God didn't intend that. God intended us to take organic things for our bodies because our bodies are an organic we're organic creatures. We have to have that. To put something synthetic in our body in a drug or some form, then what you're doing is actually covering up one symptom and creating another one. And then you have to take another medication for this symptom and another medication for something that caused. So the garden soil is a lot like that. If we take our garden soil and we don't do anything with it. I mentioned this on one of the videos the other day with Grow Family about my father. My father talked about when they were kids that the old people would just farm a piece of ground to death. And then they would just let it lay bare and grow back up with weeds and bushes and stuff. And they'd go clear off some more woods and clear out a new spot, and they'd make a new garden spot. And they'd farm it to death. And that's what's happened to the land in our country. Our forefathers and our parents, they destroyed our land in a lot of aspects by just farming it to death, not amending it with anything. Now, some of our forefathers were very wise, like Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. If you go back and read a lot about their plantations and their big places that they had, they were about amending the soil. They were about planting cover crops and stuff like this because they realized that you had to nourish the soil in order to have a healthy garden. Many people on our live streams, many people in our comments go, what do y'all do about the bug infestations? What do you do about the problems? We just don't have it. I mean, we do have some bugs, don't get me wrong. When we see a particular bug, whether it's an aphid or I'm trying to think of something we might have, a few stink bugs, we pretty much try to nip it in the bud right off the bat. There's ways to combat these things. You know, stink bugs, if you want to eradicate stink bugs, it's going to be pretty difficult, especially in the South in our heat. It's really, really bad. But we've learned that we can keep them under control, let me put it that way, by getting up at, like, say, we always get up around 4, I get up around 4 o'clock in the morning, 3:30, 4 o'clock, and by daylight, where I can see the ground outside, I'm outside. And I try to head straight to the garden. If we have a stink bug problem, I go straight to the garden, and I try to let some things go to flower. And if they will flower at daybreak, when you can just see the flowers good, the stink bugs will always be up there where those flowers are, and you can take a soapy cup or something and bump them off in it while it's cool in the morning, and you can keep them under control that way. Tomato plants especially, if you get the stink bugs on tomatoes, you can do that. If you've got greens, let a couple of them go to seeds. You can do it with them. I mean, it makes it a lot easier to handle stuff like that if we do it naturally. And good, healthy soil. Now, listen to what I'm telling you now. Good, healthy soil does not produce a lot of insects. It produces beneficial insects, which in return destroys the bad insects, because a lot of them emerge out of the soil, and the beneficial insects will destroy them before they get to where they can emerge out of the soil. And then another thing is just good garden practice of cleaning up your garden. This is one thing that gets me. A lot of people want to take all their vegetable plants out of the garden and they go pile them in the compost pile. I don't do that. I mean, that may shock a lot of you, but I don't do that. I don't take my tomato plants and my potato plants and all this kind of stuff, and when it's all done and said, and go throw them over in my compost. I don't do that. I take them off to a specific place on my property in the woods over here, and I just pile them all up and I let them rot in the woods. And I let nature do its thing with them, because if you put those back in your compost pile, you just invite more disease into your plants. And in return, you don't get a healthy soil. Y'all have seen on my previous videos where I talked about how we create our dirt for our containers, how we go out here, we have trash piles that rot down, and we get the organic matter out of that and put in our containers. I mean, these are some of the things that we do. in order to have healthy soil, because a healthy garden plant is just like our body. They have cells in their system. They have to have a UV light from the sun in order to create photosynthesis, in order for all this stuff to actually take place. And and if you raise stuff in high tunnels like we do, a lot of people use greenhouses. I don't use a greenhouse. I don't want a greenhouse. Greenhouses are not feasible in my opinion. Now, if you live way up north where it gets really, really cold all the time, you might benefit from them. But the big issue with greenhouses is that if you don't have some kind of monitoring system to be able to control the climate in them, they just get too hot in the summer. Even if you're up north, they get too hot in the summer without some sort of mechanism to keep them cool down. The high tunnels, on the other hand, Wanda and I think this year has only had to turn our oscillating fans on, I think maybe twice this year. Just because it wasn't because it was that hot, it was because it was humid. So one of the things you have to realize about plants and greenhouses and high tunnels is that you have to monitor the heat. Plants that go through extreme heat have the cells in the plants, I think it's 135 degrees, that the cell structure in a plant begins to erupt and it actually destroys the plant. And see, plants are just like us. If we stay out in the sun too long and we get sunburned, we can end up with, if you're a sensitive person, I'm not, but if you're a sensitive person, your skin, mainly a lot of people up north are this way. I've learned this. They don't, they're light complected, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's just when you're down south, most people down here are dark complected because we get a lot more sun. But there's a lot more melanoma in people. And plants are no different. If they get too much sun, then they get scalded by the sun. And as a result, it destroys them. They can't produce like they need to produce. And weather affects plants and the health of plants so much. It's probably one of the number one things. More people are interested in growing something organically. I mean, and I'm going to tell you right now, that's just totally impossible. It cannot be done 100%. We can do the best that we can do with nature, but with what's coming out of the skies and all this kind of stuff, you can't produce something organically outside of a high tunnel or a greenhouse that without having some sort of a chemical from the atmosphere getting onto that plant and you having that on that plant. So that's why I don't worry about organic in lots of aspects. People talk about organic fertilizers. Organic fertilizers are really great. The problem with organic fertilizers is there's no guaranteed analysis with an organic fertilizer. And you do have to be, if you use a synthetic fertilizer, I use it on lots of things and people really crawl my case, but when you do acres of gardening like we do, it's impossible to have enough organic material to do it all with. We implement as much organic material back into the soil as we possibly can. But to supplement it, we do use a synthetic fertilizer. And when you use synthetic fertilizers with plants, one of the main things that you have to watch out for is the salt content in the ground. I've been doing this now on this piece of property for close to 20 years. I do soil analysis about every other year on my gardens. And my salt content is like 0.05. So by amending as much as I amend into the soil, the salt content from the synthetic fertilizer is not damaging my soil. And lots of people ask me, where are the weeds in your garden? How do you keep that much garden? How do you do over acres of gardening and you don't have weeds? Well, I talked about this in another video too. Weeds loves poor soil. The more weeds you have, it tells you how poor your soil really is. And if you've got a soil that's thriving and alive, you don't get as many weeds. Now, there are certain weeds, if you'll do the research on this, there are certain weeds that tells you what the soil is deficient in. A specific weed, if you look at it and you've got it out there, if you've got a field out there and it's just loaded with sagebrush everywhere, Well, that field really needs some lime to it. Lime is probably the number one thing that a garden needs. I don't care where you're at, unless you just live where limestone is really heavy in the soil and you have a really alkaline soil. Down here in the Deep South, our soil has an acid rate of about 5 to 5.5, and we usually have to put anywhere between 1 to 3.5 tons of lime per acre every 3 years in order to be able to keep our soil where it needs to be at. And if you use a lot of lime in your soil, then you get rid of a lot of weed problems. You also get rid of a lot of insect problems. So that's probably number one for us in the Deep South is lime. Now, weather and plants is a big issue. In our country at this point right now, we're facing lots of severe weather anomalies happening in this country, and it is really knocking back the production of food in this country, especially things like corn, wheat, soybeans, all the things that are the quote-unquote big producers in this country. As a matter of fact, this past week I was at the feed store, and the guy at the feed store, he's a real conservative guy. I tried to tell him some things last year that was coming this year, and I really don't think it kind of resonated with him until just this past week. I went in to get some feed, and I buy my feed in bulk. It's just cheaper that way. I carry my 55-gallon drums and just let them fill them up, and I pay so much a pound. And I looked at the feed, and I was like, wow, there's not any corn hardly in this. You see a few little cracked pieces of corn and all in there, and he said, Danny, I don't know what we're going to do. I said, well, it's finally happening, ain't it? You're finally realizing that what I told you over a year ago is just now. I told you in 2021 it was going to happen. And he goes, Dan, I just didn't realize it was going to be as bad as what you said. I said, well, in your opinion, I said, what are they telling you? He said, they're telling me by this fall, there's not going to be any feed. We're not going to be able to get any corn or anything like that. And if we do, what little we get will be at such an outrageous price that somebody like me won't even be able to stay in business if it's what I go to buy. He said, so I'm having to redo my stores now. Trying to come up with some kind of new lines of products or something other. He said, because we're not going to be able to make a living on feed. It's just not going to be there, they're telling me. And then I was like, wow. I said, so I need to go ahead now and start considering how I'm going to feed what I'm going to feed after next year. Oh, this coming year. And he said, yeah. He said, because they're telling me that the feed's just going to go away. He said, and you have to understand, the gentleman's a conservative, and he uses a little bit of foul language, just like a lot of people do when they talk about the new powers to be, let's say. He said, what is wrong with these people? I'm going to try to say it nicely, you know. What is wrong with these people up there? They're saying that he said, have you seen what's going on in the state of Oregon? They're telling them that they're not going to be able to butcher their animals and they have to die naturally and all this kind of stuff. I said, yes, sir. I said, as a matter of fact, I think I told you about that about 6 months ago. He said, yeah. He said, and it's just now happening. He said, what are they thinking? He said, what is the beef industry going to even do? He said, what are people like us running feed stores? What are we going to do? And I told him, I said, they don't care about you, my friend. It's all about an agenda. So, and I told him, I said, look, the bottom line is this. I've got to start making some decisions about my animals in the future, what I'm going to do to feed them. And right now, I mean, I only have 10 acres, and a lot of it's pasture, and a lot of it's timber, and we got the ponds, the house, and the barn, and our gardens and stuff like this. I need more area to grow corn. If I'm going to have enough grain to keep my cattle fed and my chickens, because I'm only going to go with cows and chickens, and I might get a pig to butcher and be able to feed it. But I'm going to have a way to grow my own corn, my Danny corn, And I'm experimenting this year with Hickory King to see how it does here. I've got to have a place to raise a lot more than what I have if I'm going to survive what's coming. And guys, that's the bottom line. Are you going to be able to make the transition? Because I want us to understand that in the future, and right now, as a matter of fact, we're just now getting into this. I'm having to choose my words. Even over on Patreon, I'm having to choose my words on Patreon now. And people say, well, go over to this channel, go over to this platform. Guys, it's happening on all of them. They're fixing to take down some platforms. I'm going to go ahead and tell you. But they're choosing specific words. Pay attention to words. Words like tracking. Words like registering. Words like transformation, reset, vax. There's marking. These are all new words you're going to be seeing a lot more in the near future. They're already starting to come on the scene now, and they're just casually putting these words into conversation, and we as people don't really grasp it immediately because they're so subtle. And it's the way of the devil. I mean, you stop and think about, you go back and you stop and you think about what used to be when I was a kid. We watched TV when I was a kid. My dad got a television, and we were very limited on what we could watch. But you know, you didn't hear any foul language mentioned on TV. You didn't see any people dressed indecently. Women wore everything, you know, was kind of up around top. You didn't see these low-cut shirts and all stuff that's on videos and stuff on TV. I mean, and it just wasn't mixed marriages. I mean, you know, stuff like this with when I say mixed, I don't mean racial mix. I mean like Three's Company. There used to be a show on called Three's Company with John Ritter, with one man and two women. You just, those things started coming on the scene, and my dad was like, "Oh, turn it off," you know. But this kind of stuff was brought onto us gradually, and as it was brought onto us gradually, we just accepted it. You know what I mean? Now people watch half-naked people on TV. You know, I mean, I don't watch TV, but I see some of the trailers that pop up on my YouTube videos for TV programs and stuff, and I'm like, wow. I said, they show that stuff now on TV, you know. This is kind of a comical one. My mama, when she was alive, bless her heart, my mama was a strong conservative, very religious woman, very biblically oriented type woman. I think she was too heavenly minded in a lot of ways to be any earthly good in a lot of aspects, and I used to always have to question her about that. But she got a catalog in the mailbox, and she looked, and it didn't have her name on it. It had one of the other neighbors' names on it, and it was a what's the name of that company? Victoria's Secret. It was a Victoria's Secret catalog, and she looked in it and she said, "Oh my gosh, I cannot believe that they would put such a thing out there." And I looked. I said, "Mom," I said, I looked at it. I said, "Oh, that's a Victoria's Secret." You know, at that time, I didn't think anything about it because I grew up in it and it didn't mean anything to me. But to her, it was like, I can't believe they put this kind of stuff out there. You know, women this scantily dressed and stuff like this. But to me, I just seen it and I said, "Oh, that's a Victoria's Secret." Yeah. At that time, you know, I knew lots of different people who went there. I mean, they had one in the mall down there. You could go to that place in the mall and go get the clothing. But to her, it was just because it hadn't sunk into her. It hadn't been issued into her lifestyle yet, subtly. It just hit her all at once, and that's how it was. But today, we are we're just so subtly, things are easing into our food supply and the control of our food supply, the words that's being used in our food supply. Talking to one of the guys that was here the other day, he said, you know, I think this was Grow Family, when he was here, Mr. Grow. Might not have been him. Could have been. We've had so many people by here lately that I can't remember who it was. But we were talking about the labeling of products, and it could have been Mr. Grow. When it was, as a matter of fact, I know it was. We talked about when it says all natural stuff as in a product. You look on it, and it has artificial flavorings and it has natural flavorings. And we talked about how that the companies have created a flavor that's so natural that they don't even call it artificial anymore. But it's not even real. It's still artificial, but it's called natural. There's nothing natural about it. And all of our wording is changing. The word organic, the meaning of the word organic has changed. The word of the meaning natural has changed. And I've told y'all many times about going and looking at products and asking. I call companies. I'll call a company if I'm buying something. I go, look, what's in your product? Does it have MSG, monosodium glutamates? They'll go, oh no, it don't have that in it. I'm like, really? And they said, yeah. I said, well, it says on here that it has accent in it. Yes, sir, it does. It has accent. I said, accent is monosodium glutamate. Well, sir, we're told if someone asks for something specifically, then that's how we're to answer them. We do not have the word monosodium glutamate on our product. I said, no, but it's in another word called accent. And they said, well, it's accent, sir. I said, no, it's monosodium glutamate, you idiot. You know what I mean? And that's what's happening. The transformation. Are you ready for this transformation? Are you ready to make the transformation? Because it's going to happen. Pay attention to the wording, because the wording is going to lead us into the great transformation, or the, how should I say it, the reset. And you stop and think about, what is a reset? The reset's like when you have a motor and it runs hot, and it's literally peaked out and it's overworked itself and it just shuts down. You have to punch a reset button to make it start all over again. That's where we're at with our economy. That's where we're at with everything. We've done maxed out everything. There's no way we can pay the debt back that we owe, and we're fixing to collapse, and then we're going to go into what's called a reset. They got to reset everything. And when they reset it, what's it going to be like? What's the transformation going to be like when they reset it? Stop and think about that. And when the transformation and the big reset happens, the only way you're going to survive is going to be able to grow your own food. Because if y'all over on Patreon, those of you who are over on Patreon saw the video I made the other day, and I've been trying to talk about this on Porch Time without actually saying anything, but it had to do with the new GMO spores that's going to be put on all the food in the future. It's going to be a way of labeling. It's a way of tracking. You can't wash it off. You can't cook it off. You can't heat it off. You can't get it off of the food once it's on there. And it's put on during the washing process. We talked about this on Patreon. And it's one of those things, it's a spore that allows all food to be tracked. And the big issue is once it's in the human body and it gets into the gut, they avoid the questions about how is it going to affect the human body, because people go, I only eat organic. Well, if you buy from a store, you're going to be getting GMO one way or other, because they talk in the article and in the videos and in the interviews, the man says people are just going to have to get used to it. Genetically modified food is going to be the way of the future. So, raising a home garden, nobody is doing what I've been talking about this morning to get rich. You're going to do it to survive, unless you want to dump your body full of this genetically modified stuff into your system, whether it's the genetically modified food raised from a seed that's in the soil, or if it's from the spore that's been put on the food and you ingest it that way. When you go to a doctor and you go, doctor, my stomach is hurting, and he goes, well, he takes a blood sample and he goes, oh, well, you've been eating this. They're like, how'd you know that? The barcode is in it. Whenever the food went through your system, the barcode is in your body. I know what you've ate. And you've eaten this. and that could be part of your problem. And a lot of people say, well, that could be a good thing. Yeah, but let me tell you something. When it comes down to the point where the scripture says you won't be able to buy or sell anything, and you go to the doctor and they check you and they say, well, look, have you had this? And no, I haven't had that. And they pull a sample out of you and they go, well, the barcode's in you. Yes, you did. Now, where'd you get it from? How'd you buy that? How'd you purchase that? It was done illegally. Then you get arrested. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could happen. And guys, it's setting us up for the beast system. Nobody's doing this to get rich, the gardening at home. We're not going to do it to get rich, even though it's going to cost you. To do gardening like me and Wanda does costs a lot of money. That's why we raise our own seeds. That's why we save our own seeds. That's why we do as much stuff naturally as we can here to be self-sufficient like we do. We have a permaculture system set up here where we can go outside 365 days a year. There's something to eat on our place here, fresh, every day of the year. That is our goal, and we have just about accomplished that goal completely. And guys, everything I've said today, I also want to stop and take this moment to give Christian from Ice Age Farm, a very dear friend of mine. I want to give him credit for making that video and putting it out, because I wasn't going to talk about it on Porch Time. And I've talked about for the last 2 or 3 weeks about being tagged. I've talked about being tracked. I've talked about all this kind of stuff. And Christian just had the guts enough to go ahead and do it. He put the video out there about the GMO spores. Thank you for doing it, my friend. Taking that risk and jumping out there. I should have, I guess, but I didn't. But I want to give Christian credit for that, for actually saying it. It's something I've been trying to beat around the bush and say for probably 3 weeks now. And it's and when Christian did that, I told Wanda, I said, I'm going to give him the credit on my video. I'm just going to give him the credit. Go watch his video. It deals with the GMO spores on food. And you can tell him Deep South sent you. That's great. He's a real dear friend of mine. But guys, nobody's doing this to get rich. We're going to be doing it to survive. Like my shirt says, garden like your life depends on it, because it does. And guys, that's the bottom line right there. Your life will depend on whether or not you garden or not. Your health will depend on your ability to garden. Grow, I'm going to say like Mr. Grow from Grow Family Network says, grow, grow, grow. As much as you can grow, grow. Grow it in a container, grow it in a bag, grow it in the dirt, grow it in a raised bed, grow it in a field, grow it however you can grow it in a windowsill, grow it in a GreenStalk, grow it, grow it, grow it. Guys, because at some point, your body will thank you for doing it. Now, I've gone long enough today. I could probably talk about a lot more things, but we're going to have to save it for another video. Guys, I really appreciate each and every one of you. You mean a lot to us, and if you haven't subscribed to us, go ahead and subscribe to us. It means a lot to us. Give us a thumbs up, because if you give us a thumbs up, if you share our videos, it puts us into an algorithm where more people get to hear the truth about what's going on. Now, I'm not on a bunch of social media out there in a lot of different places. I just don't have time to make these videos and keep a farm going, dealing with animals and high-tunnels and vegetables and maintaining everything around here. It's just not possible for me to have enough time. That is one of the key ways I know whether or not somebody's actually doing what they say they're doing, is by the amount of time they have to do something. I do this full-time, garden for a living, because it is my life. And I want to try to do the best that I can, and I want to be able to teach people. I want to be able to show what works in the Deep South. Now, it may not work where you're at. Me and Mr. Grow talked about this. He lives in Louisiana. We glean from one another. We don't condemn one another. If something he does, I go, well, that's stupid. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to look over there, I'm going to say, wow, my brother's doing this. Or Billy up in North Carolina, my brother's doing this. You know, I'm going to try to implement some of the things out of that down here. Our biggest issue right now, I'm going to use the word permaculture. I am a permaculture guru when it comes to growing things. And just like Billy said, he noticed it that fast when he drove in here. He's like, wow, I see all the layers, all 7 of them. There's just layers everywhere. And that's the secret to growing a healthy plant in a healthy environment. You're not going to get rich doing it, but you will survive. Thank you guys from Deep South Homestead.